In the busy city of Lagos, there lived a man named James and his wife, Priska. James worked in a big oil and gas company. He was a respected staff. Everybody in the company knew him as a hard-working and honest man. He wore neat suits every morning and left home before sunrise. Many people wished to have his kind of job. His wife, Priska, was also doing well. She owned a beautiful boutique in town. Women loved her shop because she sold fine clothes, shoes, bags, and jewelry. Her boutique was one of the best in the area. Rich women came there to buy things. James and Priska were happy together. They had 2 children, Favor and Michael. Their house in Lagos was beautiful. They had a car, good furniture, and enough food to eat. Every Sunday, they dressed well and went to church together. People admired them. Some people even said, "This family will never suffer." But life can change without warning. One Monday morning, James entered his office and noticed people whispering. He greeted them. "Good morning." But nobody answered properly. He felt strange. As he sat down, one of the security men walked to him. "Sir, the manager wants to see you."
James stood up slowly and went to the manager's office. Inside the office, 3 senior workers were seated. Their faces were serious. The manager looked at James. "James," he said quietly, "money is missing from the company account." James was shocked. "Sir?" he asked. The manager pushed some papers toward him. "Your name appeared in the report." James' heart began to beat fast. "Sir, I did not steal anything." One of the workers spoke quickly. "We have evidence against you." "That is a lie," James shouted. But nobody listened. The manager removed his glasses and sighed deeply. "James, the company cannot keep you anymore." James' eyes widened. "Sir, please. I am innocent." But the decision had already been made. That same day, James lost his job. He walked out of the company gate slowly with tears in his eyes. The same workers who laughed with him before now looked away from him. Some mocked him quietly. Others shook their heads. James entered a bus and stared outside the window the whole journey home. Rain began to fall. It felt like heaven itself was crying with him. When he got home, Priska smiled happily as she opened the door. "You are back early today," she said. But when she saw his face, her smile disappeared. "James. What happened?" James sat down quietly. Then he began to cry. Priska had never seen her husband cry before. Her heart broke immediately. "Talk to me," she whispered. James looked at her with pain in his eyes. "I lost my job." Priska froze. The room suddenly became silent. Only the sound of rain could be heard. After James lost his job, life slowly became hard. At first, Priska tried her best to support the family with her boutique business. Every morning, she opened the shop early and closed late at night. She smiled in front of customers even when her heart was heavy. James also tried to stay strong. Every day, he searched for another job. He called old friends. He visited offices. He submitted applications. But nothing worked. Weeks became months. Their savings began to finish. Soon, they could no longer pay the rent for their big house in Lagos. The children's school fees became a problem. Sometimes, Priska would secretly cry inside the bathroom so nobody would see her tears. One evening, James sat quietly in the sitting room. Priska walked in slowly. "James," she said softly, "the boutique is not doing well anymore." James looked at her. "What happened?" James lowered her head. "Customers are not coming like before." James sighed deeply. Things became worse. The landlord started disturbing them for rent. Creditors began calling Priska every day. Even food became difficult sometimes. One afternoon, Priska sat alone inside her boutique.
The shop that used to be full of life now looked empty. She touched one of the dresses sadly. Then tears rolled down her cheeks. That evening, she came home quietly. James noticed her swollen eyes. "What is it?" he asked. Priska sat down slowly. "I sold the boutique." James stared at her in shock. "You what?" Priska nodded slowly. "I had no choice." James looked away. That boutique was Priska Pride. She built it with hard work. Now it was gone. A few weeks later, they packed their things and left Lagos. They traveled back to their village where James had built a house many years ago. The village was quiet and far from city life. There were no tall buildings, no fancy shops, no busy roads. Life there was simple. James became a petty farmer. Every morning, he carried his cutlass and went to the farm. Sometimes the sun was too hot. Sometimes rain soaked him completely. But he kept working. Priska stayed home most days with nothing to do. The woman who once owned a classy boutique now sat outside peeling cassava with village women. Life humbled them badly. Still, Priska continued praying. Every night, she knelt beside the bed. "God," she whispered, "please remember us." One evening, James returned from the farm looking tired. His clothes were dirty and his slippers were almost torn. Priska quickly brought water for him. As James washed his hands, he spoke quietly. "Priska, I have been saving some money." Priska looked surprised. "Saving money?" James nodded. He entered the bedroom and brought out an old envelope. Inside was 50,000 naira. Priska's eyes widened. "Where did you get this?" James smiled weakly. "From farming little by little." Priska touched the money carefully. It was the biggest money they had seen in a long time. James looked serious. "Tomorrow, I want to travel to Lagos." Priska became nervous. "What?" "I want to meet some old friends. Maybe one of them can help me find work again." Priska looked hopeful immediately. James continued. "If things work out, I will come back for you and the children." Then his face changed. "But if things do not work out, we will use this money to survive." Priska nodded slowly. James handed the envelope to her. "Keep it safely." That night, Priska could barely sleep. She kept praying quietly. The next morning, James left for Lagos. Priska stood outside waving at him until the bus disappeared. Days passed slowly. Priska missed her husband deeply. On the third day after James left, she heard loud music from the church near their house. Later that afternoon, one of the church women visited her. "Sister Priska," the woman said excitedly, "there is a powerful program in church today. You should come." Priska was not interested at first. But later that evening, something pushed her heart. She carried her Bible and went. The church was full. People were singing and clapping. The pastor preached with great energy. He spoke about faith. He spoke about hopeless situations.
Then suddenly, he stopped preaching. The whole church became quiet. The pastor raised his voice. "God is about to change somebody's story tonight," people shouted loudly. Then the pastor spoke again. "I need 5 people that will move God with a seed of 50,000 naira." Priska froze immediately. 50,000. That was the exact money James gave her. The pastor continued speaking. "If you can sacrifice for God tonight, your hopeless condition will change." Priska's heart began beating fast. She remembered their suffering. She remembered James struggling on the farm. She remembered the tears they cried at night. Tears filled her eyes. "Lord," she whispered. Without wasting time, Grace ran out of the church. People looked at her in surprise. She rushed home quickly. Her hands were shaking as she brought out the envelope. She stared at the money for a long time. Then she closed her eyes. "I believe you, God." She ran back to church. Breathing heavily, she walked to the altar and dropped the money. The pastor placed his hand on her head. "As you have moved God tonight," he declared loudly, "God will move your situation." Priska cried heavily. For the first time in many months, hope entered her heart again. She returned home smiling. She truly believed something good was coming. But she had no idea what was waiting for her. 1 week later, James returned from Lagos. Priska was cooking when she heard his voice outside. Her face brightened immediately. "James." She ran outside happily. But James did not look happy. His shoulders were weak. His face looked tired. Priska's smile slowly disappeared. "How was Lagos?" she asked carefully. James entered the house quietly. "Things are hard," he said. Grace's heart sank. James sat down. "I could not get any help." Silence filled the room. Then James looked at her. Bring the money. Priska froze. Her body suddenly became cold. Which money? She asked softly. James frowned. The 50,000 naira. Priska swallowed hard. Her mind became confused immediately. She stood up slowly and entered the bedroom. From the bedroom, she entered the toilet. From the toilet, she entered the kitchen. Fear covered her face. How do I explain this? She whispered. James waited outside impatiently. Grace. She finally walked back slowly. Her hands were shaking badly. James looked at her carefully. What is wrong? Priska could not look into his eyes. Then quietly, she spoke. I used the money. James stood up immediately. What? Priska quickly explained everything about the church program. I gave it to God, she said with tears in her eyes. I wanted God to change our situation. James stared at her like he could not believe what he was hearing. You gave away all the money? Priska nodded slowly. James became very angry. Priska, he shouted. That was our last hope. Priska began crying. I believed God would help us, James laughed bitterly. You moved God with my money?
Priska tried touching him. Please understand. James pushed her hand away. As you moved God with my money, he shouted angrily, I will move you back to your father's house. Priska fell to her knees immediately. Please, James. But James was too angry to listen. That night, nobody ate food. The children stayed quietly in one corner. The house felt heavy. For the next 2 days, James barely spoke to Priska. She cried often. Sometimes she prayed. Sometimes she simply sat quietly and stared outside. People in the village even heard about the matter. Some mocked Priska. Which kind of faith is this? Others laughed at her. She gave away their last money? Priska felt ashamed, but deep inside her heart she still believed God would remember her.
2 days later, early in the morning, James was outside clearing the grass in front of the house. The sun was already hot. Sweat covered his body. His mind was still full of anger. Suddenly, he heard the sound of a car horn. He turned around slowly. A black SUV drove into the compound. James became confused immediately. Big cars never entered their area. The car stopped. A young man wearing a neat suit stepped out. He looked rich and important. Daniel dropped his cutlass slowly. Good morning, the young man said politely. James nodded carefully. Good morning, sir. The man smiled. Are you Mr. James? Yes. The young man stretched out his hand. My name is Mr. Stephen. I came from your former company in Lagos. James' eyes widened immediately. From the company? Yes. James's heart began beating fast. The young man continued. The truth has finally come out. James looked confused. What truth? The workers who accused you of stealing confessed before they were arrested. James froze completely. They confessed? Mr. Stephen nodded. You were innocent all along. James could not speak. His eyes slowly filled with tears. The young man smiled warmly.
The company sent me here because I am the newly transferred manager. James still looked shocked. Then Mr. Stephen brought out a car key and a house key. You are needed back immediately, he said. The company has given you a new position, a car and a house. James stared at the keys in disbelief. His hands trembled as he collected them. Tears rolled freely down his cheeks. At that same moment, Priska was inside the house praying quietly. Suddenly she heard James shouting, Priska! Fear entered her heart immediately. She rushed outside quickly. When she came out, she saw the black SUV. Then she saw James crying. She became afraid. What happened? James looked at her. For a few seconds he could not speak. Then suddenly he hugged her tightly. Priska became confused. James? James cried openly. God remembered us. Priska looked shocked. James explained everything quickly. As she listened, tears filled her eyes. She covered her mouth in surprise.
Mr. Stephen smiled as he watched them. Priska slowly looked up toward the sky. Thank you, Jesus, she whispered. James turned to her with pain in his eyes. I am sorry. Priska shook her head while crying. No. I am sorry too. James held her hands tightly. You stood in faith when I lost hope. Priska smiled through tears. That day, joy returned to their home again. The villagers gathered around in surprise. The same people who mocked them before now congratulated them. A few days later, James and Priska returned to Lagos with their children. Their new company house was bigger and more beautiful than the old one. James resumed work with honor. Priska also opened another boutique. This time, her business became even bigger than before. People traveled from different places just to buy from her shop. One evening, James stood on the balcony beside Priska. The city lights shined brightly around them. James smiled softly. "Do you remember the village days?" Priska laughed quietly. "How can I forget?" James held her hand. "We almost lost everything." Priska nodded. "But God did not forget us." James looked at her lovingly. "And I will never send you away again." Priska smiled warmly. Together, they watched the beautiful Lagos night. Their pain had become a testimony. Their tears had become joy. And from that day forward, they lived happily ever after.
Wait before you go. In this community, we don't tell stories and leave like that. We ask questions. If you were Priska, would you move God with the 50,000 naira, or are you going to keep it according to what your husband told you? Let's discuss in the comments section.